Hello! We're outside today. Such fun. Okay. Starting at page 349, I believe. Did you see what that young woman did, Princess? Said General de Fourpeville to the Princess de Lorme, whom he had come up to greet and whom Madame de Saint-Euverte had left for a moment. Odd, wasn't it? Is she some sort of performer? No, she's just some woman, a young Madame de Compromeur, answered the princess without thinking, and then added hurriedly, I'm only repeating what I heard. I haven't the slightest idea who she is. Someone behind me was saying that they were country neighbors of Madame de Saint-Euverte, but I don't think anyone knows them, really. They must be country folk. Anyway, I don't know if you're intimate with the brilliant society here, but I can't put a name to any of these astonishing people. What do you think they spend their time doing when they're not at Madame Saint-Euverte's? She must have ordered them along with the musicians, the chairs, and the refreshments. You must admit these guests from Belloirs are magnificent, but does she have the heart to rent the same extras every week? It isn't possible. Ah, but Compromeur is quite a good name, an old one too, said the general. I see no harm in the fact that it's old, answered the princess, dryly. But still, it's not euphonious, she added, isolating the word euphonious as though between quotation marks, a little affectation in the delivery that was particular to the Guermantes set. You don't think so? She's pretty enough to eat, though, said the general, who had not let Madame de Compromeur out of his sight. Don't you agree, princess? She thrusts herself forward too much, I think. In so young a woman, that's not so nice. Because I don't believe she's one of my generation, answered Madame de Lorme, this expression being common to both the Gallardons and the Guermantes. But then the princess, seeing that Monsieur de Fourpeville was continuing to gaze at Madame de Fourpeville, Compromeur, added half out of spite against her, half out of friendliness towards the general, not nice for her husband. I'm sorry I don't know her, since you've set your heart on her. I would have introduced you. She continued, although she probably would have done nothing of the kind had she known the young woman. I will have to say good night to you, because it's the birthday of a friend of mine, and I must go pay my respects, she said in a tone of modesty and sincerity, reducing the fashionable party to which she was going to the simplicity of a ceremony which was tiresome, but which it is obligatory and also rather touching to attend. Besides, I'm supposed to meet Bassin there. While I've been here, he's been seeing his friends he has been seeing friends of his, people you know, I believe. They have the same name as the bridge, the Ienos? Before that, it was the name of the Victory, princess, said the general. What do you expect, an old soldier like me? He went on, removing his monocle and wiping it, as he would have changed a bandage, while the princess instinctively looked away. The nobility of the empire, it's quite different, of course, but really, for what it is, it's very fine, of its kind. There were men who fought really like heroes. I have the deepest respect for heroes, said the princess, in a slightly ironic tone. If I don't go with Bassin to see this woman, the Princess Diana, it's not because of that. Not at all. It's quite simply because I don't know them. Bassin knows them. He loves them dearly. Oh no, it's not what you might think. They're not having an affair. I have no reason to object. Anyway, what use is it when I do try to object? She added in a melancholy voice, because everyone knew that the day after Prince de Lorme married his ravishing cousin, he had deceived her, and he had not stopped deceiving her since. But this is not the same. These people he used to know. These are people he used to know. He's as happy as a pig in clover. I think it's very nice. But I can tell you But even what he has told me about their house, can you imagine? All their furniture is empire. Well, naturally, Princess, it was their grandparents' furniture. Well, I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's no less ugly for all that. I understand perfectly well that one can't always have pretty things, but at least one's things should not be ridiculous. What do you expect? I can't think of anything more conventional, more bourgeois than that horrible style, cabinets with swans' heads, like bathtubs. Actually, I do believe they have some beautiful things. They must have that famous mosaic table that was used for the signing of the Treaty of... Oh, I'm not saying they don't have things that are interesting from a historical point of view. But things like that can't ever be beautiful because they're simply horrible. I've got things like that myself, which Bassin inherited from the Montesquieux. Only they're in the attic of the Guermantes where no one can see them. Anyway, really, that's not the point. I would rush around to their house with Bassin. I would see them even in the midst of their sphinxes and their brass if I knew them, but I don't know them. I was always told when I was little that it wasn't polite to go to the homes of people one didn't know, she said, assuming a childish tone. So I'm just doing what I was taught. Can't you see those good people, if someone they didn't know were to come bursting into their house? Oh, they might make me feel quite unwelcome, said the princess. And she coquettishly enhanced the smile which this supposition had brought to her lips by giving her blue eyes, which were fixed on the general, a dreamy, gentle expression. Ah, Princess, you know very well they wouldn't be able to contain themselves for joy. Not at all. Why? She asked him with the utmost vivacity, either so as not to seem to know it was because she was one of the foremost ladies in France, or so as to have the pleasure of hearing the general say it. Why, what do you know about it? It might be the most disagreeable thing in the world for them. I don't know, but judging by myself, it already bores me so much to see people I don't know. I believe that if I had to see people I didn't know yet, even if they had fought like heroes, I would go mad. Besides, you see, except when it's an old friend like you, whom one knows quite apart from that, I don't know if heroism would take one very far in society. I often find it quite boring enough as it is to give a dinner party, but if I had to offer my arm to Spartacus going into the table, no, really, Vercingetorix would never be the one I would send for to make a 14th. I think I would save him for the large parties, and since I never gave any... Ah, Princess, you're not a Guermantes for nothing. You have your share of it all right, the wit of the Guermantes family. They always say the wit of the Guermantes family. I've never been able to understand why. Do you know other Guermantes who have it? She added bubbly, joyfully in a burst of laughter. Her features concentrated, interconnected in a web of animation, her eyes sparkling, blazing with radiant sunshine of gaiety that could be kindled only by remarks, even if made by the princess herself in praise of her wit or her beauty. Wait, there's Swann. He seems to be speaking to your young compreneur. There, he's next to old Mother Saint-Hubert. Don't you see him? Ask him to introduce you, but hurry up, he's trying to walk away. How frightfully ill he's looking, don't you notice? Said the general. My dear Charles, at last he's coming. I was beginning to think he didn't want to see me. Swann liked the Princess de Lorme very much, and the sight of her also reminded him of Guermantes, the estate next to Combray, the whole countryside which he loved so much and had ceased to visit so as to not be away from Odette. Using the half-artistic, half-countryside courtly formula, which he knew were pleasing to the princess, and which he resumed quite naturally whenever he re-immersed himself for a moment in his old social milieu, and wanting anyway for his own sake to express the yearning he felt for his country, for the country. Ah, he said to some vague general audience, in order to be heard by both Madame de Saint-Hubert, to whom he was speaking, and by Madame de Lorme. for whom he was speaking. "Here's the charming princess. See, she has come up from Guermantes expressly to hear Liszt's Saint Francis of Assisi, and has only just had time, like a pretty titmouse, to go and pluck a little fruit from the wild plums and hawthorns and put them on her head. There is even a bit of dew on them still, a little of the hoarfrost that must be making the Duchess groan so. It's very pretty indeed, my dear princess." "What? The princess has come up expressly from Guermantes? But that's too much. I didn't know. I'm embarrassed," exclaimed Madame de Saint-Euverte naively, not being used to Swanns' wit. Then, looking more closely at the princess's headgear, "Why, you're quite right. It's meant to look like, what shall I say, not chestnuts. No, oh, what a ravishing idea. But how could the princess have known what was going to be on my program? The musicians didn't even tell me." Swann, who was accustomed, when he was in the company of a woman whom he had kept up the habit of addressing in gallant language, to say things so delicately nuanced that many society people could not understand them, he did not condescend to explain to Madame de Saint-Euverte that he had been merely speaking metaphorically. As for the princess, she began laughing heartily because Swanns' wit was highly appreciated in her set, and also because she could hear a compliment addressed to her without finding it most exquisitely subtle and irresistibly droll. "Well, I'm delighted, Charles. If you like my little hawthorn fruits, why did you speak to that Compromer woman? Are you a neighbor of hers in the country too?" Madame de Saint-Euverte, seeing the princess appeared happy to chat with Swann, had moved off. "But you are too, princess." "I? But then those people have country places everywhere. How I would like to be in their place. It's not the Compromers, it's her own family. She's a Legondrine daughter, and used to come to Combray. I don't know if you know you're the Comtesse de Combray, and the chapter owes you a due." "I don't know what chapter owes me. But I know that I'm done 100 francs every year by the cure, which I could do without. Really, those Compromers have a most astonishing name. Just in time. It ends just in time, but it ends badly," she said, laughing. "But it doesn't begin any better," Swann answered. "Really, the two abbreviations together." Someone very angry and very proper didn't dare finish the first word. But since he couldn't stop himself from beginning the second, he should have finished the first. Then he would be done with it for once and for all. "Our jokes are in charming taste, my little Charles. How tiresome it is not to see you any more," she added in a caressing tone. "I so much like talking to you. Just think, I wouldn't even have been able to make that idiot Frobeville understand the name Compromer is astonishing. Admit that life is a dreadful thing. It's only when I see you that I stop feeling bored." This was probably not true, but Swann and the princess had the same way of looking at the small things of life, the effect of which, unless it was the cause, was a great similarity in their ways of expression themselves, and even in their pronunciation. No one noticed the resemblances because their two voices were utterly unlike. But if in one's imagination one managed to divest Swann's remark of the sonority in which they were developed, of the mustache from under which they were issued, one realized that these were the same sentences, the same inflections, that these turns of phrase belonged to the Guermantes set. When it came to the important things, Swann and the princess did not have the same ideas about anything. But now that Swann had become so sad, always in a sort of tremulous condition that precedes the moment one is going to cry, he felt as compelled to talk about grief as a murderer is to talk about his crime. When he heard the princess say that life is a dreadful thing, he felt comforted as if she had been talking about Odette. "Oh, yes, life is a dreadful thing. We must see each other soon, my dear friend. What's so nice about being with you is you're not cheerful. We could spend an evening together." What a good idea! Why don't you come down to Guermantes? My mother-in-law would be wild with joy. It's supposed to be so ugly thereabouts, but I must say I don't dislike that countryside at all. I loathe picturesque spots. I agree it's wonderful, answered Swann. It's almost too beautiful, too alive for me just now. It's a place to be happy in. Perhaps it's because I lived there, but the things there speak to me so. As soon as a breath of wind comes up, when the wheat begins to move, it seems to me someone is about to arrive. I'm going to hear some news. And those little houses by the edge of the water, I would be quite miserable. Oh, my dear Charles, watch out. There's that dreadful Rampillon woman. She's seen me. Please hide me. Remind me what it was that happened to her. I'm getting all mixed up. She's just married off her daughter or her lover. I can't remember which. Maybe both of them, and to each other. Oh no, I remember now. She's been dropped by her prince, pretend to be talking to me, so that Bernice woman won't come over and invite me to dinner. Anyway, I must fly. Listen, my dear Charles, now that I've seen you, for once, won't you let me steal you away to the princesses? She'd be so pleased to see you, and Basile too. He's meeting me there. If we didn't get news from you, from Monet, just think. I never see you at all now. Swann declined, having told Monsieur de Charlus that when he left Madame de Saint-Evure, he would go directly back home. He did not want to run the risk, by going on to the Princess of Parmas, of missing a note that he was hoping all evening would be handed to him by a servant during the party, and that perhaps he would find in his concierge's keeping. Poor Swann, said Madame Dulombe that night to her husband. He's always so kind, but he appears quite unhappy. You'll see, because he has promised to come to dinner one of these days. I do find it absurd that a man of his intelligence should suffer over a person of that sort, who isn't even interesting, because they say she's an idiot. She added, with the wisdom of people not in love, who believe a man of sense should be unhappy only over a person who is worth it, which is rather like being surprised that anyone should condescend to suffer from cholera because of so small a creature as the coma bacillus. Swann wanted to leave, but just when he was at last about to escape, General de Frobeville asked him for an introduction to Madame de Combremeur, and he was obliged to go back into the drawing room and look for her. Now, Swann, I'd rather be the husband of that woman than slaughtered by savages. What do you say? The words slaughtered by savages pierced Swann's heart painfully, and at once he felt the need to continue the conversation. Well, you know, he said to him, some really fine men have lost their lives that way. For instance, if you remember, that navigator whose ashes were brought back by de Montdurville, de Pérouse, and Swann was immediately happy, as if he had spoken Odette's name. He was a fine character, La Pérouse was, and one who interests me very much, he added with a melancholy air. Ah, indeed, yes. La Pérouse, said the general. The name is well known. It's got its own street. You know someone in the Rue Le Pérouse? Asked Swann, in some agitation. I only know Madame de Chanlivault, the sister of that good fellow, Chaspierre. She gave us a nice theater party the other day. Her salon will be very elegant of... Oh, it's windy. Her salon will be very elegant one of these days, you'll see. Ah, so she lives in the Rue Le Pérouse? It's an appealing street, very pretty, and so melancholy. Why, not at all. In fact, you haven't been there in some time. It's not melancholy these days. They're beginning to build there. They've got some buildings going up in the whole neighborhood. When at last Swann introduced Monsieur de Frobeville to young Madame Combremeur, since it was the first time she had heard the general's name, she ventured the smile of joy and surprise she would have given him if no other name but that one had ever been uttered in her presence. For as she did not know the friends of her family, the friends of her new family, each time a person was presented to her, she believed he was one of them, and thinking it would be tactful of her to look as though she had heard a lot about him since she was married, she would put out her hand with a hesitant air, meant as proof of the inculcated reserve she had to conquer and the spontaneous congeniality that succeeded in overcoming it. And her parents-in-law, whom she still believed to be the most brilliant people in France, declared that she was an angel, especially since they preferred to appear, in marrying their son to her, to have responded to the attraction of her fine qualities rather than her great wealth. That's where I'm stopping, at page 357. Have a lovely sunny day.